Hey everyone. Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Learn at Lunch lesson. So, as Sheila mentioned, we're going to look at the importance of light in landscape photography. So, I'm going to share. Hopefully, this will work. Okay, there we go. Um, so we'll start off as always by introducing myself in case anyone is new to the lessons. My name is Catriona, and I am a professional photographer based in near Dungannon in County Tyrone. Um, the lessons are recorded and will be uploaded to the library's NI YouTube channel. So if there's anything that I cover today that you want to take a wee bit more time to think over or review or even practice some of the tips that I give today, don't be afraid to pause the video when it's uploaded. It should be uploaded within a day or two onto their channel. And if anybody is interested, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. My main photography page is Divine Photography NI on Facebook and the Divine Photo on Instagram. And the photography training part of my business is called Photo Academy NI, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram as well. And I always start off by mentioning if anyone is interested, you can join my 52-week photography challenge, which is called 52 Creative. You can join it at any time throughout the year. And it's a great way of getting in regular practice. And you can use a camera or a smartphone to take part. And you will receive an email every Monday morning that'll tell you the topic for the week. And then it gives you some tips. And there's a winner picked every week. And there are prizes available as well at the end of the year for the winners of the challenge. So with no further ado, we'll move on to this week's or today's topic, should I say, which is light in landscapes. So, as you all know, if you've listened to any of my sessions before now, light is everything in photography. Without light, you won't have a photograph. But light plays an essential role in landscape photography because it can change completely the mood and the tone, the color, and it can highlight textures, and it just can totally transform a photograph. So um, what you're aiming to do if you like taking landscape photographs is to understand and to master light and maybe be prepared if you're going to take some landscape shots either on your camera or your smartphone. And then you can think about the composition, which is how your shot is laid out, the mood and the overall impact of the photo. But light contributes to all of those things. So I'm just going to throw in some of my photographs as we go through here and talk a wee bit about those as well. So for anyone who follows me online, you know that I love sunsets, and this was a shot that I took just outside, it's not too far from Sligo, and I was driving along the road and I happened to look over to my left-hand side and I saw this like wee pocket of light that had appeared underneath the clouds because it hadn't been a great day. And that's the beauty of living here where we live, in that the light can change just in an instant. So we're lucky in that now we have smartphones that we can very quickly carry with us wherever we go, and take a photograph. In the past, we were more reliant on cameras and you had to remember to take it with you and have it charged, etc. So we all have smartphones normally in our pocket now. So if you do see, hopefully when you listen to this, you'll start to maybe think about light a wee bit differently in terms of landscape photography. And if you do see that moment where there is a shaft of light coming through the clouds or a beautiful sunset, you'll maybe stop and think about snapping it on your phone. So another thing that I always look out for in, well, all types of photography, but particularly in landscapes, is reflection, because it just adds a different dimension to your work. And you can see here the light, the sun was setting over to this direction, it was coming across, and it was just this very subtle type of light. And we'll talk today about the different types of light and the direction of light in landscapes and how important that is. Also, if there's any questions or comments, don't be afraid to drop them into the chat, I meant to say, and then I'll have a look at those at the end. As I mentioned already, in landscape photography, light serves as a primary factor that can bring the environment to life. So it can shape and define the landscape, and it can add depth, contrast, and color. And when I say depth, remember that photography is a two-dimensional medium. So what you're trying to do is convey a sense of depth within the image. And one of the techniques you can do is to add layers where you change the position where you're standing or kneeling or lying down when you're taking the photograph. And by changing what I refer to as your shooting angle, when you move lower down, then you can include elements in the foreground, in the middle ground, and the background. And then that helps add that sense of depth to the photograph. But light can also help convey that, and we'll hopefully see that as we go through the lesson today. So I think I've covered everything there. Yes, on shadow. So the time of day that you're taking the photograph makes a big difference for landscape. So a professional landscape photographer will be paying particular attention to the weather, and they'll think about the time of day that they're going to take the photograph, wherever they're going, how that will interact with the landscape. And they'll also have traveled to that location on a separate day, probably to scout it out if it's not somewhere familiar to them, to see what way the light is and how it's fallen across the landscape and what features it highlights. So preparation is very important if you like taking photos of the landscape. This is another shot that I took up near Gortin Glens, just in the wintertime there. And again, the weather had been a bit mixed bag that day. And I was driving down and I happened to look in the rear view mirror and I saw again just the clouds had split and the sun. Now the sun had just set behind the horizon line, but you can see it's still lighting the sky. And we'll talk about that in a wee second here, about the different times of day and the different colour and tone of light that it produces. So when you look at a photograph, it hopefully can make you feel a certain way. And when I look at this one, well, the snow obviously impacts as well, but I feel like cool, as in cold, when I look at it, but it gives you that wintry feel. Something which I discovered, I meant to actually put, a photograph in here to show you an example, but I went on a course a couple of years back and they were talking about using social media, so say the likes of Instagram, and they found that most people tended to respond or react or interact with a post that had a warmer feel to it. So I'll be interested to hear what you think. Do you like a cooler tone shot or do you prefer a warmer toned sunset shot? There's no right or wrong. It's just down to personal preference. So you can let me know what you think on that front. And so I've talked about that already, about texture and revealing the details and again the colour. Yeah, so natural light then would be widely depend on the time of day that you take the photograph, and it is divided into three main categories where you have the golden hour light, blue hour light, and then more midday or just daytime light. So we're going to look at these in a bit more detail and then look at some examples of photographs. So this was a shot I took, you can guess obviously with the moon in the sky here. It wasn't actually at night time, but the moon, depending on, and this is something only I never really thought about up until last year, but the moon rises and sets as well. Sometimes we just see it appearing in the sky, but since I've become more interested in astrophotography and the northern lights, then it's important to know like the phase of the moon and where it is and what time it rises in the sky and sets. So there are useful apps that you can keep an eye on that. And there's I think it's free, it's called Stellarium. It's an app which is great, and you can download it in your phone, and wherever you point, it's more, they have like a compass almost, and it's a great indicator of what stars that you can see in the sky and where the moon is, and the Milky Way if you like, if you're interested in it as well. So this shot was taken, it's very, you can see the light's very subtle, but again, I used the river here as a leading line leading into the shot. And it's it just makes me feel very calm and serene when I look at this photograph. And then just the wee hint of the moon here as an extra focal point, and then you can see it reflected in the water. So that's just a wee image to share there with you. So characteristics then of natural light. So each of them has their own unique characteristic, and golden hour light, so that's that are just before sunset or they are just after sunrise. It might not be a full hour. It depends on the time of year and where you are in the world, but roughly you have at least a good half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, probably longer in the summertime, where you have that nice warmer golden glow to your images, and then the shadows tend to be longer, because remember that the sun, when it's rising, it's lower in the sky. Normally, when in the wintertime, it tends to do more of an arc like this. In the summertime, it tends to go up above and then come down, and then just before sunset, so it's lower in the sky, and that creates longer shadows, which is really good for landscape photography. But normally the golden hour will give you more warmer, softer, and more diffuse lighting. And diffuse lighting is where it's not just as intense and strong. So they all add to some lovely photos in the golden hour. This was an image that I took in Dungannon Park. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the area. And I went out to take a shot of the sun. Well, it was more just the sunrise in general and that golden hour light and the blue hour light. And I just happened to see the sun was coming, rising up through the trees. So just a tip in general for landscape photography. If you try to take a landscape shot and the sun is in the sky, it's going to be exceptionally difficult to try and get a shot where it doesn't look too overexposed, which means it's too bright, because the sun is so bright in relation to the sky, be it golden hour or midday. So when I'm taking a shot, I'm normally looking out for where I can take an angle where the sun isn't either in the photograph or it is behind something, which kind of diffuses it somewhat. So by placing, or the position that I chose, by placing the sun in between the trees, and the tree line just came down, you can see how it makes it more subtle and it isn't just as intense. So that's just a wee tip if you are taking landscape images. This is another shot taken in the golden hour. So landscape shots, remember, they can be about a wide expanse, or it can also be a detail shot as well of something within the landscape. And this was taken on the summer solstice. I think it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I went up to nearby Moorstone Circles, just outside Cookstown in Kildress area. And again, you can see how weighted to the sun is lower in the sky. It was just at the sunset, and then I positioned myself lower down to have elements in the foreground, so it's giving you that sense of depth, but they also help to block the intensity of the sunlight as well. So that's another golden hour image. And then this one was taken in Cork about, I think that's about 3 years ago now. Again, hadn't been a great day. The weather wasn't fantastic, but I waited to, I positioned myself that the sun was just out of the image, but it's over here setting behind the mountains. So you can see how it creates more of a silhouette, which is great. You can see like the previous shot as well is almost like a silhouette, and that's a great technique to try at the golden hour, sunrise or sunset, where the light is again softer. You can see the long shadows, and it just creates a very subtle and warm feel to the image. Yeah, I talked about the shadows already, and it can highlight texture. So we're going to talk about side lighting in a minute, which is where the direction of where the sun is coming from. And that can really impact in your photos as well. But if you want to try and highlight the texture, it's good to have the light coming from the side, falling across your subject, whatever it is, be it the mountains in this case, or it could be the tree bark, whatever. And that will help to show the texture of the surface. So yeah, I think I've covered everything there, but it can really just bring out that nice warmth to your images. So does anyone like taking photographs in the golden hour? I'd be interested to hear. And then finally, again, you can see there's a pattern here. I love this time of the evening. It's very calm. It's great if you like to just decompress. It's a lovely time of day to go out, find a bit of solitude somewhere, take your smartphone, go for a nice walk, and just wait and just watch the sunset. And then you can start to hear nature just settling after a busy day. It's settling down, the noises of the birds. And this was a Brantree Loch, and the sun again is just setting over here. So you can see how, even though it's only very small in the image, it still looks intensely bright. But I want to I did wait and take some more photographs afterwards, but I do like that one where it's just a wee hint of the sun in the corner. Just adds a nice focal point. And then this is another one. This was taken up in Donegal, and this is where you can see by waiting until the sun is behind something, it does create a silhouette, but it just gives you a lovely, softer overall lighting effect to your photograph. And again, it makes me feel calm and happy when I look at this because it's warm, reminds me of summer. And then just a wee hint of the reflection on the beach here where the water's coming in and out. Now we're going to move on to, I'm just trying to keep an eye on the time here, the blue hour. And the blue hour is that period just before sunrise and just after sunset where the sun has actually went below the horizon. So the last image I shared, the sun was still in the sky. It was just behind the mountain or the rock formation. But if you wait until the sun has actually set below the horizon, or it's about 15 minutes before it comes up, that's known as the blue hour, the light. So it tends to be a wee bit cooler. It is very diffuse as well, but you can also get more like blues and purples would be introduced into the image in terms of lighting. And again, it gives you that sense of serenity and tranquility, and it's perfect for capturing more moody landscapes. And again, look out for reflections. Reflections are a great way of adding just another bit of dimension and depth to your landscape photos. So this type of day is great for images where you feature the ocean, lakes, or even like a misty forest as well. This isn't my image, but I grabbed it just to show you. I love this. I saw it recently online, and I thought it was a perfect example of the blue hour light. This was one I took. Again, that possibly could have been taken the same day as the summer solstice because it's up that general direction. And I don't know if anyone, this would be interested to hear if anyone has seen this, but I never really noticed this until maybe about 2 years ago. But when the sun is setting there seems to be like a line almost that goes up from where it is into the sky. And maybe it's just I wasn't aware of it before or wasn't looking out for it, but I've noticed that over the past couple of years that when the sun is setting, there seems to be like an almost a ray of light going up into the sky. And that's why I stopped to take this photograph. But you can see how it is. There's still a wee bit of warmth at the bottom, but there's still a bluer and it's very subtle lighting and diffuse lighting. So remember, colours in landscape photography are very important. And if anyone knows about the colour wheel, which is important in art or in photography or makeup as well, colours that are opposite each other are complementary colours. So they really stand out and work well and contrast against each other, but work well as well. And blue and orange would be two of those colours. So that's why I love sunsets, because you do tend to get a hint of blue in the sky as well as the warmer colours. And in this case, it's the blue hour. So again, not my shop, but I just wanted to show you a different perspective here where you're thinking about maybe the position of the image where or sorry, the composition of the image where you have your horizon line higher up in the image, or you could have it lower down. And it's good to experiment. And so if I am out taking landscape shots, I will take both. I'll take some where the horizon line's higher up and somewhere slower down, and then I can see which I prefer. So I just thought this was a nice one to show you the blue hour. And then we'll move on to strong sunlight. And this is the light that takes place throughout the rest of the day. Now, obviously, this will depend on cloud cover. And here in Ireland, we tend to get a lot of cloud cover, as you know. So we don't have to deal with strong sunlight an awful lot. But I look outside today here and it's a beautiful sunny day. So that makes me want to grab my camera or my smartphone and go out for a walk and take some photos, which hopefully we'll do afterwards. But think about the time of day. So today, now we're just after midday, but the light at this time, the sun will be pretty high up in the sky still. So it'll create shorter shadows and obviously gives you more contrast in your image. But I actually love taking photographs at this time of day as well when it is really sunny. It can be a wee bit more complicated, but it still can give you some really images full of contrast. And the beach or a more arid landscape are great because the sun can enhance the colours of the sand and rocks that would be there. So this was an image I took up in Donegal probably about 3 years ago. And the sun now is coming from the side, but it is high up in the sky. I'm trying to remember the name of the beach. It's near the airport in Donegal. Is it Castle something? I always forget the name of it. But it was a lovely wee cove here, and then there's another part of the beach. But I just love the way you can see there is a harsh, distinct line between the brighter parts, which are your highlights, and then the shadows. And that's what you can achieve using strong midday sun. So it's just one way example. You can really highlight the textures and see the strong contrast in that image. And then this is another one I took down in Cork as well when I was there on holidays, and in harsher lighting, but it's still lovely. Totally different feel to the golden hour or the blue hour, but it works well. So the direction of light then is very important in landscapes. So you can have the light where it's coming. So say you're taking a photograph with your camera or smartphone. So you have the light where it's coming from behind you, falling onto the scene that you're taking a photograph of. And that will be known as flat lighting or front lighting. And that provides a very even illumination, but sometimes it doesn't really give you much depth in the photo or dimension. So it can be quite flat. Not bad, it's different. Then you have side lighting, excuse me. And side lighting comes from the side. So you're taking a photograph towards the landscape. So the light will be coming in from either side. And remember, I said that can really help to highlight the texture and the surface of whatever your subject is, be it the water, rocks, mountains, or trees. So it's really great for highlighting strong natural features. And then the other option you have is where the sun is coming towards the camera, which is known as backlighting. And that's great for creating like silhouettes and sunbursts, which is where have you ever seen those photographs where you have the sun looks like a wee starburst? So to create that just very quickly, it's probably harder to do on a smartphone, but if you have a camera and you want to try and replicate that, now you can get filters which you can screw onto the front of the lenses, but if you want to try and do it in camera, the setting you need to do it is your aperture setting. So you could try aperture priority mode or your manual mode, whichever you feel comfortable using, and then put your F number, which is the unit of measurement of aperture, put it up to a higher number of maybe F13, F16. And by doing that, you actually reduce the physical size of the aperture, and then that helps create the starburst. And the number of what would you call them? The starbursts that come out will depend on the type of aperture that you have in that particular lens. So it'll vary from lens to lens, but it's a bit more complicated to try and do, I would imagine, with a smartphone. But backlighting is perfect for doing that. So this is front lighting, and this is where the sun is coming from behind me over towards the subject. And as I mentioned, it can look a wee bit basic, but it really just depends on, sometimes if you're only going to be passing through an area and you only have that opportunity to take a photograph, then you work with what you have, but it maybe doesn't reveal as much depth and dimension. This is another example of it here. That was actually taken up near that beach in Donegal on the same day. Sun was higher in the sky, and again, it's quite flat, but it was a nice enough image. Sorry, my stop working. Oh, there we go. One that I would probably tend to use more would be side lighting, and that is, again, if you combine the side lighting with the golden hour where the sun is lower in the sky, you get beautiful long shadows. And again, the light is softer, and for landscape photography, softer lighting can work really well. And then remember, golden hour adds that warmer hue to your photographs too. So this was a shot I took down at Downpatrick Head, just off the coast of between Sligo and Mayo. And when you look at a photograph, and this is, if you're not sure about where the light is coming from and you're looking at other people's photos, look for the shadows, because remember, the shadow will always tell you where the light is coming from. So if you see the shadow off to the side, then know that the light is coming from the side. And you can see how it has highlighted the texture of the water here, and also the formation in the water. This is a shot I took up in Donegal, near, I'm trying to remember if it was near, I think it's near Mallinhead. And I had been up, took some photos, and I was coming down, and I saw this wee cottage just as I was leaving. So I drove up the road just to get a better angle, because I wanted to have, I took some where the light was coming from behind it, but it wasn't really as, I didn't think it worked particularly well. And that's the other thing. If you are out taking photos, move around and try different angles, because you'll get a totally different perspective depending on where the light's coming from. So try it with maybe flat lighting or the front lighting where the light's coming from behind the camera. Move around, try the side angle, and then move around and try backlighting if you're fit to do that. So I like this because it really, you can see the shadows are here. I think from memory that was the sun was lower in the sky. It wasn't just right golden hour, but it was quite a stormy day, but it had warmed up a wee bit, and then you can see the shadows here. So you can clearly see where the light was coming from. And then I placed the cottage just in the bottom left-hand corner using that rule of thirds, which is your compositional aid, and that's your grid lines on your smartphone. We talked about that, I think, in week 1, where you can turn those on to help you think about where you're placing your subject, focal point in your image. This was an image up in Donegal. That's maybe about, it was Storm Kathleen, I just remember because that was my mummy's name. And I took, now it wasn't like when the peak storm was there, and it definitely wasn't as bad as last week, but I took a drive up and the water was, I wasn't intending to go around, it's near, what do you call that, is it Five Fingers Strand? And I wasn't intending to go on around that direction, but I got a wee bit scared because the water was coming up over the wall. So I stopped, only went so far, and I grabbed a few shots and come back. I'm sure it was fine because there were loads of cars coming down the road, but I just didn't fancy taking a chance. But you can see the light again coming from the side, and this shot is full of like movement and using a faster shutter speed will freeze the action. And that gives you that sense of movement in the image. And yes, we can just see that example of the but it's kind of a mix, I suppose, between side lighting and backlighting almost, because the sun was like over that direction but coming across. So you can see it's just capturing the texture in the water. And then I wanted to get the spray. Really, that's what I was trying to do, was capture the spray that was coming over the wall. And then finally we have backlighting, and backlighting is where the light is coming towards the camera. This can be more challenging to take photographs in because it's more tricky to get a more even exposure. And you could possibly get what's known as like lens flare, or like wee orbs. Have you ever seen these wee orbs of light? And that's just where the light is reflecting through the lens, and they look like sometimes you can get rays, but sometimes they can look like wee orbs, and that is created where you have backlighting, where the light is coming towards the camera. So there are different ways of overcoming it. You can position yourself so that, like in this image here, sun is behind the clouds. So you're trying to like reduce the brightness of the sun overall. But there are settings. Well, you can use filters, and filters you can screw onto the front of your lens on the camera. You can also tweak it whilst you're editing in post-production or whatever editing app that you're using. And there is a setting, I'm going to cover this in a wee second, that you can use. Some cameras have a HDR setting. Some smartphones have a HDR mode. I'll tell you what that is in a wee second. Or you can adjust it afterwards using the Snapseed app, which we have referred to in previous lessons. And I'm going to cover that in a wee second. So just a tip, if you are taking photographs in this type of lighting, so if you're using, I'm going to probably aim this at a smartphone because I'm guessing most people are using that to take a shot. If you point your image towards wherever you're taking the photograph, and then if you tap on your screen, that focuses. So you're telling the smartphone where to focus in the shot. And then there's normally like a sun icon appears beside the focus circle or square. And if you move that up or down on your screen, that will make your image brighter or darker. So now this image I did take with a camera, but it's technically what you're doing the same thing. The camera will measure or read the light when you have it pointed towards, and then you can override it by adjusting the settings. So on a smartphone, you tap the screen and then move your sun icon up or down. And most of the backlighting, I'm moving it down just to bring a bit more detail back into the shadows and just to reduce the overall brightness of the photograph. And the other important thing, if you are taking photographs pointing towards the sun via a camera or smartphone, is to keep your lens clean, because it helps improve the focusing of the camera, and it avoids lens flare, which is that streaks that you can sometimes see in your photo. This is a photo, it's probably one of my favorite photos I've ever taken, and it was taken just at the end of last year. Again, I went up to Gorton Glens and took some shots up there, but I was leaving and I was coming down the road, and it hadn't been a great day weather-wise, but the sun was coming out from behind the clouds just as I was leaving. So I pulled over safely at the side of the road, saw this nice farmhouse. I'm just thinking, actually, I must take a drive up again and see if the trees are still standing after last weekend, but hopefully they are. But I saw this wee farmhouse and the shape, and it was just the way the light was coming through the clouds. And this is backlighting, and it's a perfect example of it, where you have, and also know that in landscapes where, if you want to try and convey that sense of depth, so things that are further away will look more misty. So if you can add elements in the foreground by like changing your shooting angle, and then it helps to add that or convey that sense of depth. So you can see how it's paler as it goes further from the camera, and then it gets darker as it comes closer. And then you have the wee shape here in the foreground. So it's one of my favorite photos. I don't know, I'd be interested to hear if you you like it or not or what you think of it, but that's a good example of backlighting. And here's another one taken up at Ballantyre Harbour up at the north coast. Again, hadn't been a great day. It had actually been raining most of the day. And I happened to be up there, and I took a scoot round to Ballantyre and was walking between it round towards White Park Bay. And the sun, literally the sky just exploded in this really rich red and orange colours. So, and there were hints of purple as well. So I waited until the sun was behind this rock formation, or position, changed my position rather, should I say. And then it gives you a bit more ability to have a more even exposure in the shot. But again, full of colour, full of vibrancy. But you can feel the storminess in the image as well, and see the rocks as they're further away from the camera look paler. And then diffuse lighting. And diffuse lighting, that happens a lot here because we have cloud cover and we tend to have maybe a lot of grey skies. But again, sometimes just in the blink of an eye, it can change. And this was a shot I took over near Loch Fay, just outside Cookstown. And the sun again, it was just setting, but the clouds split, and then I saw the moon, just a wee hint of the crescent moon, and then I think it was Venus from memory that night was there. So I jumped out of the car, pulled over, and I used my tripod because I was using slower shutter speeds because I wanted to create a more what would you say, a smoother effect to the water, and that's how you achieve that, by using a slower shutter speed. And I didn't need to use a filter on the camera at that stage because the light was softer. But by waiting until the sun was there, it doesn't have really any hot spots in the shot, which is areas which are over bright, and it gives you more even lighting. And that's perfect. That type of lighting is perfect for waterfalls, and keep in mind this time. And where it's not, you don't have such high contrast, so diffuse lighting is perfect for images where you want to try and create this type of effect, which is using slower shutter speeds, because it makes it a wee bit easier for the camera to get an even exposure whilst you're using the slower shutter speeds. That was up in Donegal, Azaranka waterfall. If anyone has been up there, it's a lovely spot. So just very quickly, a couple of tips. If you do take photographs of the landscape and you want to edit them in some way, I touched on HDR. So in Snapseed, you have, if you open the Snapseed, open an image, the one that you want to work on, and then on your tools option in the center, if you scroll down, there's an option which is called HDRscape. And when you open that, HDR stands for high dynamic range. And what that means is it's a photograph, and this happens a lot in landscapes where you have areas which are very bright, you have midtones, and then you have areas which are very dark. So think of, say you had a mountain range and there was water or a lake, and depending on where the angle of where the sun is, say the sun's coming from the side, you may have areas which are very dark, which are in shadow, and then the area where the sun falls, which is a lot brighter, and then you have your midtones, and that can be very hard for a camera to try and get a more even exposure. So if your camera or smartphone has HDR mode, you could try taking a photograph in that mode, and what it tries to do is it tries to bring some detail back into the brightest parts by darkening them somewhat, and then it tries to, what's known as, lift the shadows, which is it lifts the darkest parts of your image to bring some detail back into them. Now, I will show you this, but I know it's not for everybody, and again, it's personal choice. Some people hate HDR. Some people love it. It's totally down to you whether you like it or not, but I just wanted to show you in case you thought you would try it out. And remember, I'll show you how to adjust it. You don't have to do this at the full, when you go in and try it, you may think, oh goodness, that looks awful. So I'll show you how to tone it down a wee bit if it's too much. And HDR tends to look, they're very distinctive type photographs, but they can look a wee bit like dreamlike or artificial. So when you open up HDRscape, then you have these 4 options along the bottom. So you have strong, fine, people, or nature, and you can simply tap just on the screen beside those at each of the options, and it will change it slightly to give you a different result. So I've showed you some examples here, hopefully. This is the original photograph, and then this is edited over here to HDRscape. So you can see hopefully the difference between those. isn't for everyone, as I mentioned, but it does look artificial. So it's not going to be a very natural looking photograph if you use HDR scape, but sometimes it can just bring dark areas back to life. And that's using the strong option, which is probably the more obvious adjustment. Nature then isn't necessarily always as intense, and that one it does kind of look still a wee bit artificial. People tends to be not normally as obvious, and then if you want to try fine, sometimes it can be a bit more subtle. But overall, if I show you, show you the options here. So that was, oh no, that was the one that I adjusted afterwards. I tried it in HDR. I felt it was a wee bit intense. So what you can do if you think it's too much, there are slider options here which bring up the filter strength, the brightness, and the saturation. So if you feel that the effect of one of those options is too strong, so say you pick strong, and then you can go over to the slider here and then go to filter strength, and it'll default to +50, I think, from memory. And then if you just use the slider, move your finger on the left or the right of the screen, and that can help either increase or decrease the intensity of the filter effect, if that makes sense. The brightness then adjusts the brightness, which makes it brighter or darker. So if you went to brightness, you can move your finger to the right to make it brighter, or to the left to make it darker. And then the saturation is the intensity of the color. So if you want to make the colors even richer, which you don't normally need to do in fairness with HDR, because it tends to make them quite warm toned. But say you wanted to reduce the intensity of the saturation and make it not like a more desaturated effect, which is more subtle, then you can move the saturation to the left on the screen, and then hopefully you'll come up with something like this, which is a wee bit more subtle. So I'm going to show you 3 photos here just to show you exactly what it would do. This is an original photograph. It's not a fantastic photo. It was just a quick one I took as an example on my smartphone. And then this is where you go into Snapseed and you could make some adjustments to it. Not using the HDR yet. It's just, I think I use one of the looks or styles in Snapseed, the one which is called Pop. So if you go into Snapseed, open an image, and then along the bottom, you have looks or styles on the left-hand side, depending on whether you're iPhone or Android. And then you have a number of presets along the bottom. And if you pick one of those, it will make a series of adjustments. So I think this was Pop that I picked. And then the next one is the HDR. And you can see how it has really changed the shot. And that's the 3 of them beside each other. So hopefully you can see the difference between them. You can let me know what you think. And then the last one, just if you really like images that are full of drama, there is an option in Snapseed called Drama. And when you tap on it, it brings you up a number of different presets. Now, I would say be mindful, it can be very well, it is dramatic, I suppose is the best word to use it, but it can be very striking. It's very obvious. It's not for everyone's taste, but you can pick any of these options at the bottom. And then remember, you have your slider icon here where you can go in and adjust them and fine tune them. But if you really want to add drama to an image, it might work well with the blue hour photographs, actually. You could try that. And that's just one image using the drama, which was brighter, and that's the darker one. And that's it.